Good evening, garden friends, and welcome to Sip, Sow, and Share, where we slow down, pour or pick up something good, share stories that talk about what's growing right and issues that we end up having in the garden. This is not just about, what we're sowing. It's about connecting and being creative and cultivating a community one sip at a time, one sow at a time, one share at a time. So today I'd like to go over some of the topics that we talked about in my garden community. Now, the first was test your knowledge. Which off-season task helps improve next year's garden the most? And the options were cutting everything back early, adding mulch to protect the soil and roots, fertilize heavy in the winter, or watering on a weekly schedule. Well, the winner was adding mulch to protect the soil and the roots, and then cutting everything back came in second at 14%. Adding the mulch was at 86%, because we all know that whether it is in a hot area or if you end up getting snow or freezing temperatures, the mulch acts as a insulation for the roots and the soil. Because one of the things that I did notice when we were having those steady freezing temperatures, there were things that I was, planting in the ground. And the one thing that I did notice that maybe at about, a half an inch or an inch of the soil, it was solid. But once I got down deeper, the soil was more pliable. And that told me that, number one, I had enough mulch on my plants and the roots. And it ended up keeping it insulated so that the freezing did not get all the way down and possibly damage the root. So it is recommended that whether in high temperatures or if you're dealing with freezing temperatures, to at least put 2 to 3 inches of mulch around your plants. Keep it away from, the base of the stem so it does not encourage, possible rot or encourage, fungus growing. But in order to prepare for the following season, making sure that you have a nice coverage of mulch on your beds. All right. The next question was, you notice a caterpillar on your plant. What is your move? The first was, let nature handle them, hand pick them off, spray something, depends on the plant. And the number one was depend on the plant with 57%. And that's the thing. When you think about caterpillars, and you got good caterpillars and you got the ones that can end up decimating your garden. I sit here and think of the milkweed family of plants that ends up being a housing or hosting area for the monarch butterflies and their larvae, so there's definitely a benefit in regards to, caterpillars. And like I said, asking the question of what does that move look like? Some individuals may just allow nature, to handle them. And nature could be a bird come down and swoop the caterpillar and eat it, or handpick it, because individuals still recognize the benefit of having caterpillars. And then some had stated spray them. I tend to not do anything that would possibly negatively impact the caterpillars or any type of pollinators. And the spray may be just spraying it with water, to get it off your plant, not using anything that could cause damage. So I do believe, depending on the plant, is how we can go about making decisions and whether or not to remove the caterpillar if they're doing damage, or allow them, like for the milkweed series of plants for our monarchs, to be able to allow those plants to be their host. Okay, the next question was a true or false. Sunflowers always face the sun all day long. 68% said true, 32% said false. Now this one applies to both answers. In doing some research, young sunflowers do end up moving to where they will face the sun. But when sunflowers get mature, they stay in the same position of the sun. So they are not moving like the smaller sunflowers will do to help them grow and flourish. But once they end up getting to full maturity, the sunflowers will stay in that same position. So true and false is the right answer, depending on the stage that the sunflower is in. And I just thought that was like some interesting facts, in regards to how at different stages plants respond to the sun. Next was, which common kitchen herb can improve the flavor of nearby tomatoes? Basil, parsley, chives, or oregano? Basil got 89%, chives got 2%, and oregano got 10%. Basil is the correct answer, and let me tell you the reason why. Now, because they are considered companion planting effect, they are also pest deterrent, subtle soil interaction. They share aromatic compounds, and though the flavor boost is partly anecdotal and partly supported by plant chemistry, science consensus say it may subtly improve the flavor, definitely improves the health of the plant, absolutely is a good pest management, and then it also enhances the culinary pairing. I don't know about you guys, but when I'm having some type of pasta or even fish, having that combination of, maybe roasted tomatoes with some basil on it, chopped on it, that flavor, it just enriches. And I just thought that was such an interesting fact that I didn't know. But you think about it, when you put the combination together, it gives a very rich flavor to it. All right, and the next question. What is one change you're making in 2026 to offset 2025's challenges? First was better plant placement. Next is fewer plants, more intention. Third, improved irrigation. And then fourth, more native plants and shrubs. The top was fewer plants, more intention. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. Better plant placement was at 26. Improved irrigation and more native plants and shrubs were both at 18. Now, one of the things that I am really focusing on this year, and I had noticed through a lot of the comments on a couple of my videos, that being more intentional about not only your plant choices, but the placement, but then also the amount of time that you are able to invest in your garden. And I think when you end up being intentional about your garden, you end up being able to get more joy out of it. It doesn't seem like a chore, because not feeling that you have good control over your garden. The ideal in regards to better placement of plants. I tend to move plants around, and a lot of that has to do with the landscape of my garden. We've added crabapple profusion trees that will get anywhere from 10 to 15 foot tall and about 8 foot wide. So that's going to end up changing how some of my garden beds currently are, to where I'm going to have to be reimagining where I'm going to be, placing the plants. And then improved irrigation, and then introducing more native plants and shrubs. One of the things that I am finding, especially down here in Georgia, and also having a full sun garden, native plants tend to be more drought tolerant once they get established. So that too falls into the being intentional when designing your garden, is knowing the amount of sun and choosing the right plants that can end up handling the sun, or if you have a very shaded area, just making sure that you're choosing the right plants there. Well, guys, there were some comments. Let me go into the comments, because we had a new gardener that ended up responding on here. I'm just looking on my laptop, guys. Let me see here. Okay. It was in regards to the one challenge that, or one change that you're going to make in 2026. And this actually came from, Angela. And her channel is Angela Peaceful Garden. She says, new gardener, started in March of last year. This is something I always ask myself. Is this plant good here? Will it get enough sun or too much? That is why I will grow in containers until I figure out my light. And a couple of individuals, along with myself, had commented in regards to it, and I had told her, for a new gardener, that is definitely a great way to get a sense of whether or not your plants are going to be successful, putting them in pots. And as the sun hits it being a whole lot easier to pick up a container and move it, so that, you can end up truly finding the right location. And then when she wants to plant it in the ground, more than likely it will end up being successful. Betty from Simple Southern Garden had commented, that's a great idea. And I don't know if you guys remember Betty. Betty and I have done, along with some other gardeners, a couple of collaborations. She is in North Carolina. And, and this is the beauty of this community, is, to sit here and have, a new gardener who is really thinking strategically and having that understanding of knowing that, depending upon the plant, your plant choices, making sure that they're in the right location. So having them in the pots and literally shifting them, once again, Angela, phenomenal move for a new gardener. And then, I think we had, okay. And Barbara had said trying to stay on top of things. And I have to agree with Barbara, because, as I told her, I says, that's part of the reason why I ended up setting my garden up in zones. Now, while I have them set up in zones, I don't always follow it, but it does give me a foundation that if I stick to it, then it doesn't feel like, I'm out in the garden 4 hours, and then not really being able to enjoy it. So thank you so much too, Barbara, for your, comment on that subject of what you're going to be doing differently for 2026. All right, guys. That is all that we have for today's session of our community board. I so appreciate, the individuals that commented and those that ended up participating in the surveys. One of the things that it tells me that no matter what zone you're in, what area you in, what are in your soil type, there's a commonality that we all experience as gardeners. And this is the thing. We can learn from each other. Individuals may end up having success on things, and just through conversation, we can then in turn possibly tweak a couple things. And I'll give you a good example. Was Steph from Hooked and Rooted. She ended up growing some beautiful Madam Butterflies. It was seedlings, and I tried those, and it's like, I'm doing something wrong, and I don't know what it is, and she was very encouraging, to tell me, don't give up, gave me some suggestions in regards to, hey, they're slow and growing, make sure, good lighting and what have you. And when I went back and looked at my setup as far as the input that she gave me, I found that my trays were a little too far from my grow lights. And so what I ended up doing was I did another batch of the Madam Butterflies as she suggested, but I found these little raised hands. They're like out of plastic, but it's like a solid plastic, to where it actually brought my grow lights up to about 2 to 3 inches from the plants. So like I said, I so love the community board. I so love, getting tips from other YouTubers. And that would be the thing that I would suggest, to anybody. There's a lot of them out there, and dependent upon, our style of garden, the things that we like to focus on, take the time to, check out their channels, to see what they're doing to be successful and learning from them and asking questions. Because 9 times out of 10, when you do ask a question, they'll respond. I'll say that for Steph. She tends to respond to my questions, that I end up having. Because while I love gardening, I don't know everything. And even though we are in 2 different types of zones, a lot of the plants that, she has in her garden or seedlings that she's starting, I could say to her, oh, I'm doing that, or what has been, successful for you. So that's part of the reason why, I started this Sip, Sow, and Share, is to help build the community, help us learn from each other and be inspired by each other. Well, guys, that is all for today. I'll have my next series of questions and trivia out. Please, I welcome you to participate, get to know me as a YouTube gardener, and also, have the opportunity to check out, my other videos. Well, thank you again for visiting Inspiring Garden Corner. And I look forward to seeing you next time on Sip, Sew, and Share. Have a good night.